Let's talk about India. You've got an absolute economic powerhouse, right? The world's biggest population, with this huge ambition of becoming a $30 trillion economy. But all of that growth, all of that potential, is being held back by one of the most basic problems a country can have: just keeping the lights on.
So get this. Back in 2018, there was this huge announcement. India declared that 100% of its villages were officially electrified. A massive achievement, right? But then you look at the numbers today, and the reality is that almost 7 million people are still living, quite literally, in the dark. So how can both of these things be true at the same time? Well, that gap, that paradox between being connected to the grid and actually getting reliable power, that's exactly what we're going to get into today.
All right, so to really get our heads around this huge challenge and the even bigger opportunity that's hiding inside it, we're going to break it down into 5 parts. First, we'll dive into the power paradox itself. Then we'll look at the 3 system failures that are really at the heart of the crisis. After that, we'll check out a total game changer, the solar cost miracle. We'll also see how India is starting to plug the leaks in the system. And finally, we're going to ask a big question. Could all of this be India's next UPI moment?
Okay, let's start with this core contradiction: the power paradox. I mean, how can a country that's a global economic giant, a nation that wants to compete with manufacturing hubs like China and Germany, still be struggling with something as basic as keeping the power on consistently? You know, for industries, this isn't just a small hassle. These constant outages put a very real cap on how much they can grow. It threatens that whole dream of a $30 trillion economy before it even gets off the ground.
And the cost of this paradox, in dollars and cents, is just staggering. This isn't just about inconvenience. It's a massive, massive drain on the entire country's economy. Every single year, an estimated 2% of India's GDP is just lost, gone, because of these inefficiencies in the power sector. To put that into perspective for you, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars that basically just evaporate year after year, all because the system is fundamentally broken.
So you have to ask why. Why is this happening? How can a system just leak so much money and so much power? Well, it turns out this entire crisis can be traced back to 3 really fundamental failures in how the grid was designed and how it operates, and we're going to unpack them right now.
Here are the 3 main culprits. First up, you've got the coal bottleneck. For decades, the country's power came from a government monopoly on coal that, to put it simply, just couldn't keep up with the demand. Second, and this is the big one, you guys, are the transmission and distribution losses, or what everyone calls T&D losses. And third, you've got the outdated grid, an electrical system that was built for a totally different century.
To really get the biggest failure here, we have to talk about these T&D losses. The best way to think about the grid is like a giant plumbing system for electricity. Imagine for every 100 gallons of water you pump from the reservoir, only 85 gallons actually make it to your kitchen tap. The rest is just lost to leaks along the way. Well, that's exactly what's happening with India's electricity. A huge amount of power just vanishes from the wires because of old infrastructure and, yeah, in a lot of cases, straight up theft. And this chart right here really shows you the incredible scale of that leakage. India loses about 15% of all the power it generates before it ever gets to a paying customer. Now, just compare that to China, which has managed to get its losses down to just 2%. That 13-point difference, that isn't just a number on a chart. That's the difference between a power sector that makes money and attracts investment and one that is just constantly bleeding cash, unable to afford the very upgrades it so desperately needs.
But just as these problems of coal and leaks and an old grid seem like they're just too big to solve, a genuine technological revolution has appeared. It's a total game changer, and it's being driven by a stunning, almost unbelievable drop in cost that is completely rewriting the rulebook for energy.
I mean, just look at this timeline. Back in 2009, making 1 unit of power from a solar panel cost around 22 rupees. By 2025, that's projected to be just 1.6 rupees. This isn't a small decrease. The cost has literally fallen off a cliff. It's kind of like what we saw with Moore's law in computing power over the last few decades, but it's happening right now with energy.
This mind-blowing 95% cost reduction changes everything. It means solar power isn't just some green alternative anymore. It is now the single cheapest source of new energy in India, period. Just think about that for a second. It is now actually more affordable to build a brand new solar farm from the ground up than it is to just keep some of the country's old coal plants running. That's a revolution. So why is this cost drop so incredibly powerful? Well, because solar just fundamentally changes the rules of the game. Unlike a huge coal plant that takes years and billions to build, a solar farm is almost plug and play. You can get one up and running in a matter of months. Plus, its fuel source, the sun, is free, and it's not going to get stuck in some global supply chain mess. And it's decentralized. In theory, every single home with a rooftop can become its own little power plant. But, and this is a big but, this brings us to the technology's single biggest challenge. What happens at night or on a super cloudy day? This is the problem of intermittency, and solving it is the absolute key to this whole transition.
Okay, so to manage this new world of decentralized solar power and to finally fix that crippling leakage problem we talked about, India is rolling out a small but absolutely brilliant piece of tech. It's one device that is set to solve a multi-billion-dollar headache.
But before we get to the cool new gadget, you gotta understand that the problem isn't just about lost power, it's also about lost revenue. A staggering 7 to 8% of the electricity that actually reaches people gets billed, but the money never gets collected. The system's just too slow. In fact, one entrepreneur told this great story about when he was a college student. He and his roommates would always pay their internet bill first, because the power bill was their last priority. Why? They knew someone would have to physically drive to their house to disconnect them, and that whole process took forever.
And here is the technological leap that changes all of that. We are moving from the old way, a dumb meter, which is really just a one-way counter on your wall that someone has to come and physically read, to the new way, a smart meter. This thing is an intelligent device that has two-way communication. It talks to the grid, and crucially, the grid can talk back to it.
So a smart meter is revolutionary because it does three critical things. First, it measures your power usage perfectly and sends that data remotely, so no more inaccurate manual readings. Second, it creates a two-way data stream which lets the utility see what's happening across the entire grid in real time. And third, and this is the killer feature, it allows for remote demand regulation. That's a fancy way of saying they can disconnect the user for not paying their bill instantly from an office miles away. It basically solves that massive revenue collection problem overnight.
Now this massive project, installing smart meters all across the country, it's not just a repair job. It is creating an economic transformation that some people are comparing to one of India's biggest digital success stories ever, the UPI payment system.
First, let's just try to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this thing. To truly modernize its grid, India needs to install about 500 million smart meters by the year 2030. Just let that number sink in. That's a plan to put a connected, intelligent device in nearly every single home, every shop, and every factory in the most populous country on Earth.
And this quote from an investor just nails the new reality perfectly. This sector has the potential to create multi-trillion-dollar companies. All of a sudden, the power sector isn't this boring, slow government utility anymore. People are realizing what it actually is. A high-growth, high-tech space that's on the brink of an absolutely explosive transformation.
So, why does all this matter to you? Because this massive shift from a dumb grid to a smart one is creating a goldmine of brand new industries. Think about it. First, you've got data analysis. Companies can now use AI to comb through all this real-time grid data and pinpoint leaks with surgical precision. Then there's EV charging. With millions of electric vehicles coming, entrepreneurs are building the apps and charging networks to manage all that new demand. How about a new energy marketplace? A smart grid makes peer-to-peer trading possible. That means you could literally sell the extra power from your rooftop solar panels directly to your neighbor. And finally, the holy grail, battery storage. The company that cracks affordable large-scale battery storage will be the one that finally solves that solar intermittency problem we talked about. And that opportunity alone is worth billions.
And that really brings us to our final thought here. India's power grid was built for the last century, a century of centralized one-way power. As it gets completely rebuilt for this century, a century of decentralized, two-way, intelligent energy, the big question is, will this new grid be the engine that finally powers the world's next economic superpower? See, this isn't just about fixing some wires anymore. This is about laying the actual foundation for India's entire future. And the solution to its power crisis just might be the very thing that powers its rise.